Well, everyone, I'd like to move on to one of the big questions that we have to answer, graduation. I'm not talking high school graduation, not talking college graduation, I'm talking PS&P graduation. This really is the intended purpose of our project was to graduate households from PS&P. It's what USAID asked us to do. It's been the whole conversation, but actually it's become more complicated. It's been more complicated over the years. We haven't seen the numbers of graduation numbers by the government. And currently under PS&P 5, and looking at the PIM, there's a real rethinking of the graduation. So we need to talk about graduation because it's important, and it's really important to USAID and especially RETA. So we know we already have low graduation rates. Yeah, government has low interest in doing it. They're postponing some graduation, or they're looking at deferring some of the retargeting even until next year. We're hearing there's been unrest. We've had COVID-19. There's been changing government personnel, and we already know that the government has already set the targets. Not have may have already, but the targets have been set in the LRR areas. And then we also know that for self-graduation, or there's two parts, government-led graduation, self-graduation, there's lots of complications. Security, COVID-19, low motivation because of there not being active government-led graduation. So we still want to continue on with existing graduate activities, and those are really two parts. Supporting the government of Ethiopia on graduation through providing trainings to officials, and still doing the aspiration to graduate trainings for households. But I think it's time for us to broaden our scope. And when we broaden our scope, when we talk about graduation, we really need to understand, let's focus on the elements that we can manage, the things that we can control or are part of our mandate. We know this has been a problem. We don't have the authority to graduate households. We need to right now we only look at these graduation numbers maybe annually, and so it's not very regularly. And the other one is we need something that's realistic. So I'm suggesting we look at a new term, graduation ready. And what this is to take it out of the hands of the government and instead for us to say, do we, using a set criteria, do we think this household could be determined as, quote, graduation ready? Now, USAID kind of defines it already for us because they already have in their PIM a livelihood checklist. So, and they define it pretty well for us. It means a household should have done financial literacy training. They should have saved, whether internally or externally. They should have received a technical training. They should have done some business marketing skills. They should have completed business development plans or household resource plans. They say they should have been referred to an FSP. More importantly, is they should have accessed some type of external finance. And we'll talk about this later on how we want to expand it. And they have received some follow-up support. So there's some things we have to look at there. But my suggestion is that we use not the number of households that have completed a livelihood checklist. That's problematic because the government is the one who signs off at different points. But instead, households that have completed the activities in the livelihood checklist is how we now use the term to say these households could be graduation ready. So a couple suggestions as we move forward. One is, let's reduce the number of households graduated formally by the government from the number we initially had of 18,373 to what we know that they're targeting to date, which is 536. It could be a little bit more, a little bit less, but around that number. And we're making the assumption the government has not graduated any households today. Let's reduce the number of households who've graduated from self-graduation significantly. We're going to choose just a very low ball number of 150. And instead, I want us to think about households that are graduation ready. Let's reduce that from, kind of using a new term, from the 18,375 to 14,700, because we know it's just going to be more problematic. And if households haven't accessed some type of external finance, they no longer can be counted as self-graduation or as graduation ready. And we'll talk about those possibilities of access to finance. So I'd like us to reflect on these and reach to a general consensus, more or less to the numbers. Make sure we understand the logic behind these numbers, not the specificities of the numbers. And then last, I want to tell you what's next. This has been a huge issue. In fact, we just had a meeting last week with Randy Smith over at USAID. Rete was going to join us. He was unable to attend, but we agreed with Randy, that is me, Randy, and Elizabeth, that we should have a common understanding how to move forward. So in principle, we're still having these conversations with Elizabeth. I just arrived. We would say that we would like to define, we want to go through a formal process with USAID to reduce the number of mandated households to be graduated by the government of Ethiopia. Just something to learn. Same with self-graduation. And that both of us would use at an output kind of level, or output type of indicator, number of households that are household graduate ready as defined by the livelihood checklist. Beyond that, we have very different kind of theories of change where they want to make us focus on asset development. We may want to focus on more income generation. So we won't try to harmonize that level necessarily of, or those types of indicators. So we have to really spend some time on that. But this is going to be pressing because we do need to reach a consensus with USAID on all the topics we're going to be talking about by September 17th, sorry, by September 30th. And today, this presentation will be on September 17th. So again, thank you very much. And we'll be talking more detail about this on Thursday.